For the first time since 1945, the post-World War II order in the Pacific is officially dead. While the American media was busy distracting you with domestic noise, something historic just happened in Tokyo that changes the global balance of power overnight. Japan, a nation that has been constitutionally bound to pacifism for 80 years, just handed a two-thirds supermajority to a leader who wants to rewrite that constitution and prepare for conflict. Donald Trump calls her the Iron Lady, and her victory isn't just a win for conservatives, it is the beginning of a new military superpower in Asia. Let's look at the cold hard data, because the reality on the ground is far more aggressive than the polite headlines suggest. On February 8th, Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi didn't just win an election, she orchestrated a political massacre. Her coalition secured 316 seats in the lower house. That is a two-thirds supermajority. In parliamentary terms, that is the magic number. It means she no longer needs to negotiate. It means she can override the upper house. But most importantly, it gives her the legislative key to unlock Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution. For those who don't follow Asian legal frameworks, Article 9 is the famous clause written by the United States in 1947 that forbids Japan from maintaining war potential. It is the chain that has kept the Japanese military, the self-defense forces, on a leash for decades. Takaichi has made it clear she intends to break that chain. This wasn't a vote for lower taxes or better health care. This was a referendum on remilitarization, and the Japanese public just said yes. Now, why does this matter to the United States? And why is Donald Trump celebrating this as if it were his own victory? To understand this, you have to ignore the moralizing of the international community and look at the map. Geography is destiny, and nowhere is this truer than in the first island chain. If you look at a map of the Western Pacific, you will see why China is terrified of what happened this week. China is geographically trapped. To get their submarines and aircraft carriers into the open Pacific Ocean, they have to pass through a series of narrow choke points. To the north, you have the Tsushima Strait. To the south, the Miyako Strait. And sitting right on top of these choke points, like a cork in a bottle, is the Japanese archipelago. For the last 40 years, Beijing has operated under the assumption that Japan would remain passive. They banked on a Japan that would hesitate, a Japan that would debate the legality of firing back, a Japan paralyzed by its own pacifist constitution. That assumption is now obsolete. Sanae Takaichi is not a typical bureaucrat. She is a disciple of Shinzo Abe, but far more hawkish. She advocates for what she calls peace through strength. Sound familiar? It should. It is the exact same doctrine Donald Trump has been preaching, and it is no coincidence that Trump's immediate reaction was to post, "Make Japan great again." There is a fascinating layer of hypocrisy here that we need to dissect. For months, the mainstream press in Washington and London told us that Donald Trump was isolated on the world stage. They claimed that global leaders viewed his brand of nationalism as toxic. Yet here we have the leader of the world's third-largest economy, a key G7 nation, not only embracing Trump, but actively modeling her political strategy after him. The source material confirms that Trump explicitly endorsed her campaign. He called her move to hold a snap election bold and wise, and he was right. It was a gamble. She dissolved parliament early, betting on the fear of a rising China would drive voters to the polls, and it paid off big time. The media narrative that nationalism is dying, or that Trumpism is a uniquely American phenomenon, has been shattered. We are seeing the rise of a nationalist international, a network of leaders who prioritize sovereignty over globalism and hard power over diplomatic niceties. But let's go deeper into the real politic of this situation. Who actually benefits from a rearmed Japan? If you are a sentimentalist, you might worry about the return of Imperial Japan. But if you are a realist sitting in the Pentagon or the White House, this is the best news you have heard in a decade. The United States has a problem. We are $29 trillion in debt. Our Navy is stretched thin from the Red Sea to the South China Sea. We simply cannot afford to be the sole policeman of the Pacific anymore. We need deputies. We need allies who can shoot back. back. For decades, Washington has been begging Japan to spend more on defense. We wanted them to be a shield, but Takaichi wants Japan to be a spear. With a 2/3 majority, she can push defense spending well beyond the NATO standard of 2% of GDP. We are talking about long-range Tomahawk missiles, offensive cyber capabilities, and a navy that can actively patrol the Taiwan Strait. This transforms Japan from a passive protectorate into a force multiplier. In the ruthless calculus of great power competition, this allows the United States to share the burden of containing China. If the Chinese Navy has to worry about Japanese anti-ship missiles locking onto them from the Ryukyu Islands, that is fewer American destroyers that need to be put in harm's way. However, every strategic shift comes with a price, and the risk here is escalation. Beijing views this supermajority as an existential threat. The Chinese Communist Party remembers history better than anyone. They know that a unified, militarized Japan is the only Asian power capable of challenging their hegemony. The reaction from Beijing will not be diplomatic, it will be physical. Expect more gray zone incursions into Japanese waters. Expect cyber attacks on Tokyo's infrastructure. The Pacific is about to get much hotter and much more dangerous. This brings us to the specific consequence for the American citizen. Why should you care if Japan changes its constitution? Because the stability of the US dollar and the American economy relies heavily on the status quo in Asia. The trade routes that flow past Japan carry trillions of dollars in goods, semiconductors from Taiwan, electronics from South Korea, manufactured goods from China. If that region destabilizes, or if China feels backed into a corner and lashes out, the economic shockwave will hit your 401k before the first shot is even fired. Donald Trump understands this. His support for Takaichi isn't just about friendship. It is a calculated move to create a balance of terror in the region. The logic is simple. If Japan is strong, China has to think twice before invading Taiwan. If Japan is weak, the door to Taiwan is wide open. By encouraging Japan to take the gloves off, Trump is essentially trying to outsource the deterrence of China to the Japanese military. It's a high-stakes game of poker. Takaichi is the wild card that the West has been waiting for. She is effectively ending the post-war guilt trip that has paralyzed Japan for generations. Now, before we wrap up and look at the final strategic lesson, here is a quick question to test your geopolitical knowledge. We mentioned the famous Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, the clause that technically bans war. But do you know which American general was primarily responsible for writing that document in 1947? Option A, General George Patton. Option B, General Douglas MacArthur. Option C, General Dwight Eisenhower. Option D, General Omar Bradley. Think about it for a second. The answer is option B, General Douglas MacArthur. He ruled Japan as the supreme commander for the Allied powers, and his staff wrote the document in less than a week. It is ironic that 80 years later, an American president is cheering for the Japanese to tear up the very rules America wrote. So, what is the bottom line here? What is the strategic lesson for Washington? The lesson is that the era of the Pax Americana, where the U.S. fights everyone's battles, is over. The new era is about burden sharing, but real burden sharing, not just paying dues, but bringing firepower to the table. Sanae Takaichi's victory proves that the world is moving toward hard nationalism. The liberal international order, based on treaties and handshakes, is being replaced by coalitions of the willing, armed to the teeth. For the United States, this is a win, but a dangerous one. We have successfully woken the sleeping giant. Japan is back. The question now is, can we control the direction in which it marches, or have we just set in motion a chain of events that will drag us into the very conflict we are trying to avoid? In geopolitics, there are no permanent friends and no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. And right now, America's interest is a Japan that is ready for war, so that we hopefully don't have to fight one. Thanks for watching.